So we're going to go through I have, all of the information on the two truths. If we can get through it today, it's completed. So I'm going to just quickly go through opening prayers, and we won't do any um, opening meditation because next week we'll start in with seriously looking at a model of the mind and various meditations that will help us gradually understand the way our mind and our consciousness functions. It's really great, but it's going to take some practice and some effort on all of our parts. Oh, hold on just a second. Okay. So let's start with taking refuge, generating bodhicitta. We'll go ahead and do it once in English and twice in the Tibetan chant. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other far-reaching paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chadang soki choknam la, jangchu bardu dagni kiap suchi, daki chenyen gipe sonam ki, drola penchir sangye druparasho. Sangye chodang soki chognam la, jangchu bardu dagni kiap suchi, dagi chenyen gipe sonam ki, drola penchir sangye druparsho. The four immeasurable thoughts. These are the thoughts that Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, embodies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And now just invoke the Buddhas, the presence of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and spiritual masters in the space in front of you as we recite this seven-limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends and turn the wheel of dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And finally, the mandala offering, where we visualize a completely purified universe. So what we're talking about here is enlightened consciousness and enlightened form, that this is a possibility and we can be part of bringing that possibility about. Zaji perki jukshin meto, tramri raglingji, nidegen padi, sangye jingdu migde uwagi, drokunam dakshingla chepasho. Idam guru ratna mandala kam niryataya. Okay, so like I said, we're going to try and move through this information so that there's time. It's not, it's not too much, but if we had a lot of discussions and a meditation and all that stuff, I don't think we'd get through it. So we'll skip the meditation for now. and go right to this fifth part of the two truths and see if we can get through it and still have some room for questions and discussion. So the first thing that we're going to start with is there is a sequence in which the two truths are realized. This is explained by Chandrakirti, who was a 7th century scholar of the Madhyamaka school. He was based at the Nalanda monastery in India, the same place where Nagarjuna was and Shantideva was. Chandrakirti was a widely known commentator on the works of Nagarjuna. His supplement to the Middle Way, which these following verses are taken from, this supplement was written as a commentary to Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom of the Middle Way. In chapter 6 of this supplement, Chandrakirti writes, "Except for the path explained by the great master Nagarjuna, there is no other way to reach transcendent peace. All others fail to grasp the truths of the ultimate and the conventional, and therefore liberation lies beyond their reach." And here's the second verse. "Conventional truths are the methods, and ultimate truths arise from that method. Those who fail to see how these two differ are mistaken in thought and therefore take mistaken paths." So these two verses are showing that for those who don't understand Nagarjuna's view, it's impossible or extremely difficult, we should say, to experience peace. Geshe Tashi Sering says that here peace is referring to the complete cessation of suffering, which can be seen on two levels. First, from the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika levels, which is the Theravada level. The cessation of suffering means the realizations of, we talked about this before, solitary realizers and hearers who have a direct realization of emptiness and achieve what is called nirvana or cessation, the cessation from the suffering of cyclic existence. And then the other level is from the Chittamatra and the Madhyamaka school's point of view, which is the Mahayana view. And this is that as a bodhisattva who has attained what is called the 8th bhumi, meaning there are 10 bhumis or levels which a bodhisattva, after having a direct realization of emptiness, has to pass through these 10 levels in order to attain enlightenment, which is a different track than the arhats, the solitary realizers and pratyeka Buddhas, the solitary realizers and the hearers. When they have a direct realization of emptiness and achieve cessation, that they're called arhats. They're a special kind of being called an arhat. But a bodhisattva who has reached the 8th bhumi, the 8th level on their way to enlightenment, 8th level or above, then has become what is called a very highly realized being. And so they can understand these verses that Nagarjuna is talking about. Chandrakirti's second verse states that there is a sequence in which the two truths are realized. The understanding of conventional truth is the method to understand and realize ultimate truth. If we don't know this fully and completely, we'll experience difficulty on the spiritual path. For that reason, it's extremely important to know the two truths fully, but particularly the two truths in the way that Nagarjuna explains them. We discussed earlier in session 31 that the 4 Buddhist philosophical schools of tenets all have their definition of the two truths, how the two truths exist. To experience the peace of liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence requires a great subtlety of understanding. of understanding of emptiness, actually. Great subtlety of understanding of emptiness. So in that way, conventional truth, Chandrakirti says it depends on a thorough understanding of Nagarjuna's profound view or explanation of this difficult material and of emptiness. So at the level of, at the second verse, it says that conventional truths are the methods and ultimate truths arise from that method. But Chandrakirti is not saying that emptiness arises from conventional truth, but that an understanding of conventional truth will help in developing an understanding of emptiness. In that way, conventional truth is the method to achieve or understand ultimate truth. So at the level of our objective observation, conventional truth is the base, and ultimate truth is a feature of that base. For example, there's the conventional truth of this book. And this serves as the base for the ultimate truth of the book. So the conventional truth of this book is that it has a dependently arising nature. We've already talked thoroughly about this. You know, when you examine the book, you realize there's nothing in the book that exists from its own side. Everything is a dependent arising in every way imaginable. So that is the conventional truth of the book, that it's a dependent arising. So the ultimate truth then, the ultimate truth that the book is empty of any kind of inherent existence is a feature of the conventional truth of this book. It's what you would say, it's a feature of the base. They call this the base. This would be a base for both the conventional and the ultimate truth of the book. Make sense? Yeah. The main focus for us, however, is not the objective aspect of the book, but a subjective one, us, what we're thinking, our own subjective understanding of the conventional truth of the book will help us achieve our own subjective understanding of the ultimate truth of the book. Geshe Tashi points out that this requires some clarification. It's correct to say that understanding ultimate truth arises from understanding conventional truth, just as Chandrakirti pointed out in his verses. However, there are different levels of understanding conventional truth. Knowing an object is different from knowing the conventional truth of the object. Knowing about an object is different from knowing what the conventional truth of the object is. Again, we take the book. It's a conventional truth because there is a difference between the book's appearance and the book's real existence. The book has a number of fairly thin pages of paper that are printed with ink and letters and designs, and it has distinctive features. There's the front and the back covers are thicker paper. They have color on them and colorful designs and things like that. Knowing this object, these distinctive features of this object enable us to have a valid cognition that this is a book. And nobody can prove otherwise that this is a book. Just knowing that information about it, we would all agree, conventionally speaking, this is a book. But knowing all these details about the book is not actually sufficient in order to have an understanding of the book's conventional truth. The conventional truth of the book is not the collection of facts about this book, that it's made of paper, that it's, has ink on it and letters and colors and designs. Not knowing the facts about the book is not, knowing the facts about the book is not the same as knowing the conventional truth of the book. The conventional truth of the book is that the book appears to our consciousness as having an inherent self-existence, when in reality, it is a dependent arising, which we've already discussed, and is empty of any inherent self-existence. So the conventional truth of the book is that it appears to us to have an inherent self-existence. For this reason, in order to understand a conventional truth, we first need to have some kind of understanding of the object's ultimate truth. That is, we need to determine its lack of independent self-existence, which we've already done. We've already done that. But there's no way we would even arrive at that conclusion if we hadn't done the analyzing of how this book comes into existence. And this is where we have to start. So it kind of goes back and forth between the conventional truth, analyzing the conventional truth of the book, that it's a dependent arising, and then because it's a dependent arising, obviously that is inferring that it is not an independent self-existent thing, and that it must be empty of independent self-existence. So the two truths, kind of ultimate truth and conventional truth, kind of work together gradually in order for us to be able to understand bit by bit, more and more deeply, more and more fully, what is actually meant by conventional truth and ultimate truth. Lama Tsongkhapa says that discovering concealer truths, and concealer truths is just another name for conventional truth, because they actually conceal the empty nature of what they are. They appear to be very solid and self-existent, and in that way they are concealer truths. They're concealing the nature, the actual nature of what they are. So Lama Tsongkhapa says that discovering concealer truths will not happen until we have found the middle way, and the middle way is emptiness. Because to establish something as a concealer truth or a conventional truth, we are actually establishing its false nature, the false way it appears to us. And that we have a sense that it exists inherently, that it has some kind of independent self-existence, the way everything appears to us. We can only do this through refutation when we've learned about its true mode of existence, that it is a dependent arising, that it is empty of any kind of independent self-existence. So that the true mode of its existence, the true mode of the existence of the book, is its actual lack of inherent existence. To understand that an object appears independently self-existent only to an ignorant mind implies that the object doesn't actually have an independent self-existence. Does that seem clear enough? Yeah, okay. I mean, speak up if it doesn't, because we don't want to get lost here. I'm perfectly willing to stop and go over these things. So what we have to do then is integrate and harmonize two statements that appear to be contradictory in Chandrakirti's verse. The first is that we need to understand ultimate truths before conventional truths, and second, that conventional truths are the methods to help us realize ultimate truths. So how does that work? The crucial word here is realize. It's true that we can't understand the conventional nature of an object, that it appears to have an independent self-existence when in fact it doesn't, before we have an understanding of its lack of independent self-existence. But to be able to do that, it doesn't mean that we have to have at first a direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness. What we need is an conceptual understanding of what emptiness is referring to, emptiness of any independent self-existence. And this we can do logically, and this we can do inferentially. And this is the process that we have to go through gradually before we can get to a level where we would actually have a direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness. So Geshe Tashi says that the two truths actually help each other. And he says that when we walk, we use both legs, one in front of the other. And it's like that. In a similar way, a basic understanding of ultimate truth, of emptiness, takes our understanding of conventional truth to a deeper level, and then that deeper level of understanding of conventional truth takes us to a deeper understanding of ultimate truth or emptiness. So it's a gradual process of alternating back and forth between more deeply and more fully understanding what conventional truth is, what ultimate truth is, how that you then apply that again to the conventional truth and get a deeper understanding of what they're talking about with conventional truth, and then you apply that to the understanding of emptiness. So it is this process of alternating that's very gradual. Geshe Tashe Tsering concludes that this subtle level of conventional truth, in which the object appears to have an inherent existence that it actually doesn't have, will only be realized after we have a fairly good conceptual understanding of ultimate truth, a fairly good conceptual understanding of what emptiness is talking about. So even though Chandrakirti is correct in his statement that saying conventional truths are the methods and ultimate truths arise from that method, it's the actual mechanical procedure. In the actual mechanical procedure of that, both conventional and ultimate truth are continually alternating, as I said, as our understanding deepens. So now we're going to talk about how, so any questions about that? Does that seem logical? I think so, even from our own, our own analysis of this is, I know it helps me understand emptiness a little bit more when I understand the dependently arising nature of the book. So now we're going to talk about how a realized being perceives these two truths. Not all conventional truths, the things and events that make up our universe, the universe that we live in, those are conventional truths. Not all conventional truths appear to every living being's mind as having a true, independently self-existent nature. There are some beings who see these things differently. It is said in the Buddhist texts, while this is certainly so for ordinary beings like us, it's not the case for hearers and solitary realizers who've achieved the level of an arhat, which I said before. This is when they have had a direct realization of emptiness, and they achieve the level of an arhat. And it's not the case for bodhisattvas above the 8th bhumi, which are these levels that they go through on the of stages toward enlightenment. There are 10 bhumis. Once they're past the 8th bhumi, they are a highly realized being. A bodhisattva is a highly realized being. The reason they can perceive conventional truths is that they don't perceive them as having an inherent existence, is because they've already abandoned the ignorance that conceals the ultimate nature of conventional truth, the ignorance that sees things as existing inherently. They already have let go of that. Both the arhats and the bodhisattvas who've reached these levels have let go of that. They no longer see things as existing inherently or perceive them as existing inherently. All other beings below those levels subjectively perceive things and events as conventional truths that exist inherently. And that's the way we do. We're just beginning now to question it. We're beginning to start to look at things in a slightly different way. But in general, our knee-jerk reaction to everything is that it exists. When push comes to shove, it really exists independently the way it appears to us. This happens all the time in our relationships and all kinds of things. When a highly realized being, but one who's still unenlightened, when they're in the process of analyzing the ultimate nature of reality, they don't perceive conventional truths at all, because ultimate truths and conventional truths are mutually exclusive. The two cannot exist at the same time within a mind. So when for instance, a bodhisattva, a highly realized bodhisattva, is meditating on emptiness and working towards, well, they've already had a highly realized being has already had a direct realization of emptiness. So a direct realization of emptiness excludes the appearance of any kind of conventional reality. The two just can't coexist. So when this highly realized practitioner is meditating on emptiness, they perceive only emptiness. The conventional world ceases for them during that meditation because the two states of mind cannot come together in one moment of time. Outside of meditation, when a highly realized bodhisattva or arhat sees an object, there is still a mistaken consciousness, although the bodhisattva is not fooled by the mistake in the way that we are. So, in other words, they see, when they come out of that meditation on emptiness, they then see things conventionally the way we do, or they perceive things conventionally the way we do, but they do not conceive them the way we do. They understand because they know from their direct experience that they are empty of any kind of independent self-existence. And so that's the difference. Now we'll talk about, is that clear? Is that clear? The difference between them and us. They've had a direct realization, and they have continued on the path and have removed many of the obscurations they have to cognitive awareness of the way things are. We are still taking baby steps there, and that's the difference. So now we're going to talk about how a Buddha, an enlightened being, perceives the two truths. And this is kind of interesting. An enlightened being, a Buddha, by definition, is completely without any mistaken consciousnesses. So think about what that means. From the moment of their enlightenment, there's no moment of time when a Buddha does not realize and recognize emptiness directly. So remember what we just said about these two are mutually exclusive. A direct realization of emptiness and a conventional perception of existence cannot coexist at one moment in time. And there's no time when a Buddha does not perceive emptiness directly. So what is this saying? It's sort of it's a direct realization of emptiness excludes conventional truths because they're mutually exclusive. So this raises a puzzling predicament that the Buddhas must therefore be unable to see our world and our suffering. So I found that to be pretty interesting, and I was curious as to what the answer was. Lama Tsongkhapa explains this seeming contradiction by stating that Buddhas can see conventional truths, but only from the viewpoint of unenlightened beings in a very similar way that a psychiatrist who hears a story told by a schizophrenic doesn't believe it. Of course, in Lama Tsongkhapa's time, they didn't have schizophrenics. I mean, that's an example that Geshe Tashi was using. But Lama Tsongkhapa does say that in order to cure an illness, a doctor must know the illness without actually having it. A doctor must know what the illness is, even though they don't have that illness. So, going back to the definition of a Buddha by definition is omniscient. And omniscient means knowing everything, both the correct and incorrect ways in which things are perceived and conceived of. So a Buddha can directly perceive the emptiness of a cup or book, and at the same time, fully know the way in which those objects appear inherently existent to sentient beings. Now, does that make sense to you? I think the example Geshe Tashi used of a psychiatrist, analyzing or helping someone who's schizophrenic, lets us understand that you can be of help. You can understand the nature of a problem without actually experiencing the problem at the same time. And of course, a Buddha, just like us, started out as, a sentient being. When they become enlightened, they are omniscient. It's not as if they forget what it was like, to suffer, but they know that the suffering is not necessary, that it can be completely undone. So this, this is just something to think about. I had to think about it a bit before I could say, be on board with it, because the way we were usually taught by our teachers, it was just more of a. It wasn't as in much detail as that. They just said a Buddha is able to see both at the same time, both conventional existence and ultimate existence. But it wasn't explained how they do that. It wasn't explained that those two things are mutually exclusive. Therefore, a Buddha can't actually be caught up in conventional existence the way we are. It's impossible. But they do understand and know what it means to see and perceive things this way.
Christopher?
Yeah.
So beings, let's say in Jesus Christ or other beings that have come that the teaching is that they feel the suffering of the world, great beings that either take on the suffering or feel the suffering. That's different, like with what you're saying about the true Buddha or true Buddha, they understand it, but they're not actually experiencing it. It's a subtle difference. Is that kind of what you're
The
saying?
difference.
It's an thing about teachers, because teachers can teach. I mean, teachers that experience our reality are a bridge that can teach us, but it is different.
Yeah, what I would say is along the Bodhisattva path, as we're moving along the Bodhisattva path, there are many kinds of practices, such as they call it Tonglen. It's giving and receiving. So you're taking on others' suffering and you're giving all of your good qualities. And this is just a psychological process that we're doing to sort of connect us and develop compassion and understanding for all beings. And of course, a Buddha would have gone through all of this process before becoming enlightened. So like I said, the Buddha is omniscient. It's not as if they forget, that other beings suffer, or they forget what suffering was like, but they are no longer experiencing it themselves. So a Buddha is not taking on the suffering of the world to relieve all other beings of their suffering. And neither could Jesus do that, because as we see, there's still plenty of suffering. So to me, in my mind, that story about Jesus, the way it's told, taking on the suffering of other beings, it's very much like what a bodhisattva would practice. As you're being, I mean, I think even in the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, it's mentioned that, when other beings harm you, take it upon yourself and only wish the best for them, that they may not suffer. It sounds outrageous, but this is the view when we begin to realize that we are interconnected, we are interdependent, and that everything that's appearing to us is our own karmic arising. It's our own karmic seeds coming into fruition. Then we just basically take it on board and do not wish harm to any other being, even those who torment us. The Venerable Robina, I remember when 9/11 happened, she said, "As outrageous as this sounds, it's terrible that all of those the people in the Twin Towers who were killed because of that attack. It's terrible that they were killed, and there was a great deal of suffering and fear involved in that." But she said it's nothing compared to the karma that the beings who perpetrated that, whoever they were, the karma that they have taken on and what they are going to have to experience. So she says you have to have compassion for both. You can't, as a bodhisattva in process, it is a mistake to vilify someone else and say they're bad, they're wrong, they should go to hell and damn them, because that's an incorrect understanding of what's going on, of the whole karmic process and these ripening propensities. And we all have these propensities. given the right set of circumstances, any one of us could probably do some very terrible thing. And so this is why we have to work on this and we have to think about it, you know. So does that kind of, yeah. It's a tough one, really, because it's not the way we normally think, especially if we're thinking that things exist inherently, that there is no such thing as karma or previous lifetimes or imprints of habitual behavior that ripen. It's difficult for us to see all of this just on the surface. And Buddhism is about, you know, digging underneath the surface and seeing what's going on. All right, now we're going. So, any more questions about the way a Buddha perceives reality and the way highly realized beings perceive conventional truth and ultimate truth? Because we're going to move on to now a related but different topic, and this topic is about illusion and reality. And we start with something called the Samadhi Raja Sutra. Samadhi means refers to calm abiding or single-pointed concentration. It's very, very similar to the word shamatha. Samadhi, shamatha, they're very, very similar, and they mean basically the same thing. So samadhi means concentration, and raja means king. So this particular sutra that I'm going to be reading from is called the King of Concentration Sutra. So that's the translation, Samadhi Raja Sutra. It's a Mahayana sutra. Some scholars have dated the original from the 2nd or 3rd century CE all the way to the 6th century CE, which is the date of the earliest manuscript that was found. The Samadhi Raja is a very important source for the Madhyamaka school, and it is cited by numerous Indian authors like Chandrakirti, Shantideva, and later Buddhist authors. It draws our attention to the fundamental way in which phenomena exist and how our confused mind grasps at a substantial reality of things, although in actual fact, things are empty of inherent being. So there are four verses in this particular sutra, or that are taken from the sutra, that are used here. So here we go. Although due to singing, playing music, and crying, sounds of echoes arise, the echo does not reside in the sounds. Just so, you must comprehend all phenomena. Now we'll go to the second one. When a man who makes love in a dream awakens, he does not see his lover. Childishly, the lustful still clings to the lover. Just so, you must comprehend all phenomena. Now we go to the third one. Of course, we're going to explain these. The third one. The magician conjures images of horses, elephants, chariots, and so on. Yet none are as real as they appear to you. Just so, you must comprehend all phenomena. And the fourth verse, the eager woman who experiences a dream of both the birth and death of her child is joyful at the birth and saddened by the death. Just so, you must comprehend all phenomena. So we'll get into each one of these in more detail. In our everyday reality, there exists a perceptible level of fictionalizing and conjecture that we engage in. The objects of our awareness seem to be somewhere out there, right? The objects of our awareness seem to be somewhere out there, and our understanding of those objects seems to be somewhere in here. So it seems like there's a disconnect between the objects of awareness and our understanding of them, that they exist in separate places or something. Whether we get close to the truth or a million miles away from it, we never quite see things the way they actually are because of this sense of separation from the objects of our awareness and our understanding, which seems inside. The Tibetan masters encourage us to see all things as illusion-like, but this doesn't imply that life is an illusion. They say life is not a dream with no reality at all, but it is like a dream. It's like a dream in that based on facts, we generate fiction. There are many things we experience that we know are illusions, but they seem to be easily distinguishable from the hard reality we live in, as seemingly easy to distinguish as a fairy tale from the news. And as I think most of us realize now, that's not so easily distinguished anymore. So this is something for us to be thinking about, these verses, and it's something we need to look at. The Samadhi Raja Sutra uses an echo, dreams, and a magician's illusion as examples of the confusion we have between appearance and the reality behind the appearance. All of these examples that are given in the sutra exist conventionally, but what is their mode or condition of being? When we shout in a cave, there is an echo, and we can't deny its existence. A dream is a process of the mind, so that too exists conventionally. And we all know of conventionally existing magicians. I mean, Siegfried and Roy and Penn and Teller and David Copperfield. I mean, we all know that the magicians exist conventionally even today. So now we're going to talk about the magician and how they cast a spell. A magician can make us see an object of our awareness as if it was something else entirely. In the same way that conditions and accompanying circumstances that we experience can alter our perception of things. We've all experienced that. If we're disturbed about something and something wonderful is going on and everybody else seems happy, the causes and conditions for us are not there to experience that happiness. We are in another place. It's the causes and conditions that make us experience things the way we do, that make us feel about things the way we feel about them. So this is an important thing, the causes and conditions. Taking a particular object of our awareness, a magician, quote, casts a spell by altering the conditions and circumstances through which we perceive that object, causing us to think we're seeing something completely different than what it actually is. If the magician is very good at what they do, we will actually believe the deception. That is extremely profound and has implications for our world today and what's going on. And it's important for each of us to think a lot about this, to go back and look at this and think about it. Similarly, everyday objects of our awareness deceive us because the conditions are there for things to have an intrinsic, self-existent nature that they don't actually have. A book appears as a book to our mind when somebody has bound together paper pages that are printed with words and images, and then we all conventionally agree that it's a book. But there's nothing from the side of the paper and the ink and the pages that are self-existingly saying, I'm a book. It's not the book that's defining itself. It's us. we're the ones who project onto this collection of things. That's a book conventionally, and we all agree. And nobody would disagree with that. And it functions as a book, but not from the book side. Because of our conventional agreement, it's as if a spell has been cast that causes the book then to appear as an independently self-existent book. That's what the spell is. That we don't actually see it as a dependent arising the way it actually is. We don't see it or perceive it as having a complete lack of any inherent existence the way it actually does. So the spell that's cast is that everything appears to exist the way it looks to, with that we agree that it exists. We agree that everything exists discretely and separately and unconnected, when in fact that's not the case at all. Everything is connected to everything else, as we discussed with the book. And it's not just connected to the physical or material universe. It's connected to our mind as well. It's connected to consciousness. We're the ones deciding what the letters mean, what they stand for, the sounds that, come out of our mouth. We're the ones who project all of that on, all of that meaning. That's very much a consciousness is involved in that. It's not just, the cosmos and the matter in the cosmos that put this book together. It's the mind as well. And it runs pretty deep when we explore that. So that's the magician stanza, what that's referring to. Now we're going to the dreams and the echoes. The example of dreams used in the Samadhi Raja Sutra illustrates that things appear in a certain way to us because of our karmic imprints. We all know that dreams aren't real, or I think we all know that dreams aren't real, but even so, most of the time, they have a very strong connection with our own life experience. Dreams conventionally exist. We all will agree there is such a thing as a dream, but we'll also agree that the dreams aren't the real world. They're the dream world. I mean, that's what it means by saying dreams aren't real. So in our dreams, past events, future plans, and fears all appear jumbled up, seemingly without any relevance or order, but they are all triggered by the preoccupations and psychological tendencies going on in our mind. This is what is meant by karmic imprints. They are the psychological tendencies and habits that we have developed, they say over eons of time, but if you just took this one lifetime, you could go with that. Although it doesn't actually explain why each of us are born with particular propensities that are completely unlike anybody else in our family. If everything started out as on a base level, everything being equal, it would seem that, everyone in our family, because of our parents and all that, there would be some, of course, there'd be genetic qualities, but there would also be things that wouldn't stand out in such a bizarre way, that how could you be so different from everyone in your family? And they say even the genetics, we are attracted, we are irresistibly drawn in a sort of like attracts like, when the consciousness enters the fetus in the womb, or even they say once a consciousness enters the sperm and egg, it's a life that has started. So Buddhism, in terms of abortion, would say, well, yeah, I mean, you can do that, it's your choice. Buddhism is not saying don't have an abortion, but what they are saying is, according to their understanding, is that the life begins at the time of conception. Otherwise, there is no conception. They say otherwise the sperm and the egg won't take together and there won't be a baby. So the point being there is that you're coming in, you're drawn to the genetics of a particular set of a couple or whatever, that the consciousnesses are sort of attracted to one another because there are similarities, and you are drawn to that, and those genetics you're irresistibly drawn to those genetics because of your karmic imprints. And that sounds weird to us at first, but it takes some thinking, it takes some analysis, and looking at the Buddhist view of things that there is no beginning to consciousness or form, and there is no end to consciousness or form. They just take different kinds of forms. Where are we now? Yes. We misconceive reality because we're carrying karmic imprints from tendencies that we've developed over many lifetimes. We are so habituated to seeing everything as inherently existent that we keep seeing things in the same way. And that is our deepest habit. That is the habit that is the daddy of them all, is that we see things, we're habituated to seeing or thinking of things as if they inherently exist. Me, I, the ego, my body, my thing, my family, my stuff, my friends. All of this, we see it as inherently existing, and this causes all of the problems and the suffering that we have. It's important to understand how that's connected, how seeing things as inherently existent causes the suffering. Any discussion on that? Any, why would it be that seeing things as inherently existing would be the cause of all of our suffering? Any thoughts? Well, let me just say, first of all, it starts with the sense that we think we have an inherently existing I, and we're grasping onto that as if it is the center of everything. It's like the center of the universe. So we have an extremely self-centered view when it comes to the idea of I or me or anything that belongs to I or me. Like I said, my family, my friends, my stuff, my whatever. This is when you take that view, that very, very self-centered view of ego, self-grasping, which all of us have, that is in direct opposition to the actual view of interdependence and interconnectedness and interrelatedness and dependent arising. So that view itself is going against the actual nature of reality, and therefore, it causes all of this suffering. We get completely, we'll look at the world, bent out of shape when things don't go the way I want, the way me and my people want it to go, the way me and my kind of people want it to go. And we protest and we get angry and we start wars and we ruin relationships all over this. And that's, and you can use your own logic with that. Go through that process again and think of it for yourself and see if you agree. Because it's not important that you just hear a teacher or me or somebody say this. It's the most important thing is that each one of us goes through this process ourselves, and it's a logical process. We can do this logically. We may not have direct experiences yet, but we can logically see, yeah, everything is interconnected. Everything is a dependent arising, including me, I, and everything else. And so when you realize that, when you logically look at that, you can see that a self-grasping, self-centered mode of being, whether it's a group of people or just one person, is a mistaken way of being. And it's going to cause huge amounts of suffering. That's the whole point of the Buddha's teachings, is to stop the suffering. And that's what we're aiming for.
Christopher, can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that? So I'll preface it by saying I probably misunderstood what you said. So what I'm about to say is incorrect. But what I heard you say, or what I think I heard you say, was that if we're interconnected, then seeing things from my perspective or seeing things as inherently existent is an incorrect view. But we also know that there are things that that we have been taught not to do. So let's take a big one, for example, killing. So when this idea of seeing things how they exist versus how they inherently exist, if I am if I'm witness to, either in person or through some other form of media, a killing, and let's take of a human being, I can see that that's a killing that is not me, because I'm not the one that was killed, nor was I the one who perpetrated it.
Mhm.
But the person doing it, I perceive as that I can see that that person perpetrated the killing, and that there's a person who was killed, that they are that I'm get confused where that did not happen, because it did happen conventionally, but they're connected because of previous karmic behavior that brought both of those folks together to that point at that time, and that that interconnectedness to me then is also reflective of my karmic seeds before. Is that my am I
Yes. But that's at a level that if we truly understood, if the person doing the killing truly understood the interconnected, interdependent nature of everything, and that the killing was only going to cause suffering, both for the killer and the person being killed, um, then we wouldn't do it. We would make every effort to avoid such a thing. But that's not what's going on. So what's going on is that we actually don't, ordinary beings actually don't understand the totality of what it means to be interdependently connected, because we're talking at every level, not just physically, not just matter, but also consciousness, ideas. All of these things are interdependently connected and arise. There is no one, a genius, for instance, is the result of many, 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 many causes and conditions, and they weren't all having to do with that one particular mind stream of that. The person became a genius. It's like a Buddha is the result of many, 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 many different causes and conditions that finally led this being to enlightenment. Same for all of us. So when you understand that, when you at least have a conceptual understanding of that, then what we will naturally begin to do is to avoid actions both of body, speech, and mind that are going to generate suffering, because that is not only hurting others, but it's leaving these imprints in our own mental continuum, which will ripen at some point. So yes, the killer and the one being killed are interdependently connected, but they don't see it that way. What the killer sees is, this person, I either need to get something from them, or they need to get out of my way, or they're a problem and I'm just going to kill them, without any thought, any real compassion, unless there can be the kind of compassion killings, and that's a little bit different. And that has to be, like when you put a pet down because they're in such pain. You're doing this out of, you want to end their suffering. And there are different ways of viewing this, but at a certain point, my view is, if you see the being is suffering enough and there's no way to fix it, and it's an animal that can't make that choice for themselves, and they're just suffering in terrible pain, isn't it kinder to put them out of their suffering, because they've already experienced enough of it? So the intention behind all of these things matters a great deal as well. I know it's not probably the clearest answer that you're looking for, but these answers they're not cut and dried that way. There are many, many aspects that go into how karma works.
Thank you.
Bottom line is, if we truly understand what it means to be interdependent and interconnected, then we would do everything we could to make things work in relationships, in families, in governments, and throughout the world. But as Geshe Dragpa always used to say, this is samsara, and samsara is the place where ego-grasping beings have their playground, you might say. Samsara is is the result of ego self-grasping. So it's a lot for us to expect that out of that ego self-grasping itself is going to arise this enlightened viewpoint. What causes the enlightened viewpoint to arise is for each one of us individually, we have had enough. We've had enough suffering. We say there must be some better way. I don't want to continue to fight. I don't want to continue to have bad relations. I don't want to continue to hate people in my family. There must be some other thing I can do. And this is what turns it around for each one of us. And it happens for each one of us at different times. But the problem is never going to be solved from the ego grasping point of view. And samsara is a result of ego grasping. So that's just the situation we're in. Geshe Drapa, when we would complain about I don't know, usually it was world situation thing that was going on in politics or something like that, and this is back in the early 2000s, 2006, 7, 8. He would just always shake his head and go, samsara. It's like, what are you not understanding about this? This is the way this is. This is why we're trying to remove ourselves from the suffering of this and liberate ourselves from the suffering of this. And this is why we're trying to help others liberate themselves from the suffering of this. It's this self-centered ego, self-grasping attachment to I and me and mine. That's the problem. And I don't think it's difficult for us to see that, but it's difficult for us to overcome it. It's difficult for us to push through it because the habits are so strong in us to be that way. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I wanted to say, I think that since the origin of all this suffering is the illusion of separation, that is at the heart of wanting to kill someone else, because when you want to kill someone is because they're separate from you and they're doing something that is against you, or what you were saying. Mm-hmm. So it's an exaggerated sense of separation.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. I mean, exactly. That's what ego self-grasping does. It's like we separate ourselves off into these little capsules of me and mine and ego, and we don't actually understand that we are, so connected. Everything we have is derived from what is around us and that we're connected to. We're just completely blind and ignorant of it. And when we're in the full ego self-grasping mode, we are completely blinded to the fact of how much we are depending on everything around us, and we are not separate from it at all. And this is the understanding we have to come to. And I think we only come to that when we've had enough, suffering. We're tired of it. We think there's got to be a better way. And that's what the Buddha was trying to show. Trying to show a better way for us to think and behave and be. And the idea is not to just get out for our own selves, but to then get out of this wrong way of thinking. And then when we've done that, to really work at helping others do the same thing. And just keep doing it. And I used to think, wow, you mean, is this never going to end? Is there ever going to be a finish to this? And from all I can figure out now, since everything seems to be beginningless, endless, and infinite, no, the answer is no. However, once each one of us gets to the point of enlightenment, we are no longer suffering, and it would give us the most pleasure of anything to be able to continually help and have more and more beings be released from suffering, be released from ignorance and these, and just keep working on that. And that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Just what I'm getting from your saying, and also where my mind is going with all this, when we see so much suffering, or we know of a murder, or we see so much suffering in the world, we do want to separate ourselves from it. But it's not separate from us. But as we free ourselves from the samsara and the suffering, we're also, that contributes as well, because
Sure.
it's not separate from us. So we can do what we can to help, but everything we do for ourselves also helps the dependent origination, and it helps the whole field.
Yeah, exactly, especially with the Bodhisattva view, everything we're doing for ourselves is for the benefit of the whole, of all. You know, of all sentient beings, all beings who possess a consciousness, everything we're doing is for the benefit because we're part of that as well. So it's for ourselves and it's for everyone. And yes, that will have an energetic effect. And I think sort of like that 100th monkey effect, the more beings who do this, the more kind of a wave of energy behind this kind of attitude, this altruistic attitude for the benefit of all beings. But the more that would grow, and the more quickly that would grow, that's what I would think, because we are connected, like you said, and we will pick that up. I mean, I think right now we can see that the samsaric world that we live in has many dark areas to it. Some of them are so dark that we really don't even want to look at what it is. But as a Buddhist practitioner, and if you're looking to be a benefit to all beings and to understand the nature of the problem, we have to have courage. We can't really be afraid to not look. I think we have to have the courage to look and know that since things are beginningless and endless, this cycle will continue to go on, and it will continue to go on in the same way, causing suffering, unless we do something about it, unless we ourselves change and then help others to change, do something about it. So I think the Bodhisattva path is a very courageous one, because you're looking fear directly in the face. That's what you actually come to, is to look at fear directly in the face, and you're looking at your own dark side as well, and I think it's a very mature path. It's not relying on somebody to do all the work for you, and please, let's just I'll do whatever you say, just fix it. That's not what Buddhism is about. Buddhism is about having the maturity to go through this path, to do the work, to understand the nature of reality, what's going on, how we exist, how things exist, and then to not turn away those who we don't like what they're doing, to just to hate them. Like it says in the Four Immeasurables, have attachment for friends but hatred for the enemies. I mean, there's so much of that going on, we could see it, and it's just so terrible. It's such a mistake. It's like a spell has been cast on an entire population that makes no sense at all, when actually we all want the same things. So we have to have the courage to look through that, to not give in to the hate. It's sort of like Star Wars, don't give in to the hate, right? That's not where Buddhism is going. It's actually seeing what is actually going on. What's the nature of this? Why are we doing this? It's a mistaken view. It's a mistaken view of how we exist. Goes back to inherently existing me. And as you said, separation. And we see, because of that, we are separate. We're separate from one another, when in reality we're not. We're not. So it's a lot, And I mean, as you get into these wisdom teachings, they get deeper and deeper and deeper. And the more we can take on board, the deeper we'll be able to understand the wisdom teachings. That's what we're trying to do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So one thing I read a while ago that helped me was level 1 is it's a metaphor in a garden. Level 1 would be pull out the weeds, pull out the weeds, pull out the weeds. Level 2 would be plant flowers, plant flowers, plant flowers. And level 3 would be weeds are okay, flowers are okay. The issue with that is that, for example, with the example of killing or anything that we consider not love, it's not indifference, but sort of, because it's like that person did that because that's what he thought he was supposed to do. And I'm not supposed to condemn him or her. I'm not supposed to think that this is good or bad, but
No.
it's confusing.
What we're supposed to do, and I maybe didn't get this across with Venerable Rabina's example about 9/11. We are supposed to have great compassion for the perpetrator as well as the victim. It's not just, well, it's okay because that's the way it is. No, 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 no. We're supposed to have great compassion for both the perpetrator and the victim. And we will never do that until we can do it with ourselves. We have to be able to do it with ourselves first. We have to look at our own failings squarely in the face, look at our own history, and we all have shit, we all know that. But we have to look at that for ourselves, have great compassion for ourselves, and those who we think were the perpetrators who are perpetrating, bad things on us, have compassion for them as well. Once we can do that for ourselves, then we can do it. We can do it in a very broad way. But we have to be very wise about it, very careful about it, not step into the fray and get killed. But be wise. How do we go about changing this? And I think it changes, like I said, when somebody has had enough and they're looking for another way, and they're looking for something like Buddhism, and Buddhism can help. Now, I think Brian Herman said something last week that really got Kavita upset. He said something like, I see this path as the only way. And Kavita said, what do you mean the only way? Blah, blah, blah. And in a sense, Brian is correct. Because if you were to look at, you don't have to call it Buddhism. You don't have to have the deities and the tangas and all the pictures and all of the stuff. All you have to go is it true? Is it true? Can we logically say that things do not independently self-exist, but everything is independently, is an independent arising, you might say, and it's connected. And when you logically look at this, you can see how it is connected on every level. That alone, when you go all the way with that, you will develop great compassion. You will see, this is connected to me, the one who I thought was so important. I'd be nothing without all of this. Therefore, it is in my interest to be of benefit to every other sentient being. And so there you develop that. So whatever path you want to call it, if it's going to be a true path, a path that's going to actually make a difference, it's going to have to logically follow that view in some way or other. And it doesn't have to be called Buddhism. It doesn't have to have all the trappings of Buddhism. Buddhism is very helpful because it's these all these like Chenrezig and Manjushri and Shakyamuni Buddha themselves, they're very symbolic and they're very potent psychological symbols for us to use. There's meaning in that, but they don't exist inherently. And if we make the mistake of thinking they're out there existing, just sitting there all the time like that being, we're not seeing the point of the psychological point behind what Buddhism is teaching. And so any pathway that's going to work has to address the fact that things do not exist inherently, and that things are interconnected. That just is the way it is, and there's no denying it. There is no denying it. And if we deny it, it will be a faulty path. And we can see that there are many kinds of paths that deny that. And so therefore I would say, just from my understanding, my logical understanding of things, that those paths must be faulty because they're not seeing the actual nature of reality. So Brian was right and Kavita was right too. You don't have to call it Mahayana Buddhism, but it would have to have those elements in it in order for it to be valid, I think. Just logically. Anyway, let's see where we're at. Yeah. I want to see if I can finish this up. All right, so the echo in those stanzas that we were talking about from the Samadhi Raja Sutra, the echo symbolizes our own habitual tendency to see things as existing independently. rather than existing as dependent arisings. The dream lover takes that one step further, illustrating how our desire for permanence strengthens this misconception. We want things to be permanent, so we see them that way. And the magician symbolizes the external conditions and causes that cause us to misconstrue the actual nature of reality. We become confused. And the joy and grief that woman feels for her dream child shows us how lacking in substance and reality the objects of our attachment, aversion, and ignorance are. And if you think about it, the objects of our attachment are objects of our attachment because we are attached to them. We can have objects of attachment that somebody else would go, I don't see what you see in that. So it's not the object from its own side is not what the problem is. The problem is that we grasp onto it and are attached to it as if somehow we're going to be fulfilled by that object of attachment. This is how addiction arises. Somebody else would go, I don't know what you see in, drinking alcohol all the time. I would not do that. But somebody else thinks I need this. This is going to work for me. This helps me. And so it's in the point of view and the causes and conditions and circumstances of each one of us that cause us to have the particular attachments, the particular things we have aversion towards, and our particular, we all have the similar ignorance. The similar ignorance is that we think we exist independently, sort of like privately, separately, our own little world. We are independent, self-existent me, and that's not the case. We're completely we're completely influenced and affected and influenced by the conditions around us and people around us and everything. And the sooner we're aware of that and take control of that for ourselves, the better for us, the better we'll be. Anyway, I want to move on. So I want to move on to this last bit, which is about seeming illusions and seeming reality. You remember we talked about way back about the reflection in the mirror. Our reflection in the mirror isn't our real face. The echo isn't our real voice. The person we make love to in a dream isn't our real lover. These all seem like illusions to us. On the other hand, the waking world we live in, the bodies, the buildings, the towns, and everything that we live in, the people, possessions, all of those seem to be very real to us. It's difficult for us to comprehend that they do not exist the way they appear to us. A mirror appears to us as a mirror, and we believe it is really a mirror. But when we see our face in the mirror, we understand it's not really our face, just a reflection of our face. For the quote, unreal objects, it seems like we can easily distinguish the difference between appearance and reality. But in the case of what we call real objects, it's much more difficult. However, according to the Prasangika Madhyamikas, which is the most subtle philosophical view in Buddhism, there is no difference between these two groups of objects. There's no difference between the reflection of our face and our real face, between what from our worldly perspective we would call illusion and reality. From the ultimate perspective, both are equally conventionally existent. One exists conventionally as a reflection, and one exists conventionally as a face. There's no difference between them in terms of how they exist. They both exist as dependent arisings that are empty of independent self-existence. So what we call the real face and what we call the reflection of the face both exist as dependent arisings that are empty of independent self-existence. And that's what we have to start in baby steps, thinking about and analyzing for ourselves and thinking, seeing if that makes sense to us. The Prasangika scholars caution us that life is not as black and white as it appears. Reality is not as real as it seems, nor is illusion quite as unreal as it seems. They tell us we need to let go of that sense of concrete reality and see all things as illusion-like, not as illusions, but as illusion-like or illusory. For us to understand the schism between appearance and reality on the level we're talking about requires an understanding of emptiness. Only with an understanding of emptiness will we be able to see that appearances merely give us the sense of intrinsic existence, whereas reality is the lack of intrinsic existence. Geshe Tashi says that there are different levels of understanding that we all have to go through to get to a deeper understanding of emptiness. So that's what the investigation of the four schools of Buddhist tenets within the study of two truths is all about. By bringing the mind to a more and more subtle level of understanding, the way the four schools, if you follow them, they're more and more subtle as you develop and understand what they're talking about. By bringing the mind to a more and more subtle level of understanding, we can finally understand the mind's final mode of existence. The final mode of existence of any object is the lack of inherent existence from its own side. This idea may seem easy for us to understand and logically accept, but it is certain that this truth has yet to penetrate to a deeper level in us. Geshe Tashi asks us to check for ourselves. Do we live our lives as if everything in our world lacks intrinsic existence? Are we totally free from clinging to things and events? Would there be not even the slightest ripple in our calm if we lost all of our possessions and all of our friends turned against us? If the answer is no, then all of us have a ways to go. By misapprehending the base of designation, we suffer. Remember, this is the base of designation, and we designate this as a book, but it also has an ultimate nature. The conventional nature is that it's a book. The ultimate nature is that it's empty of any inherent existence, that everything about this book is a dependent arising, everything. So by misapprehending the base of designation, that causes us to suffer. There's a classic example that I've talked about before, many of you are familiar with in Buddhism. And it's the example of the coiled rope and the snake. By mistaking a coiled rope in the dark for an actual snake, we can instantly experience great fear and think that our life is in danger. That fear might only last a few moments before we realize that it's just a rope. But until something happens to clear up our confusion, the fear is there and the fear is real. The base of designation is the coiled rope, but we label it snake, and fear arises because of that. Attachment, aversion, and ignorance all arise from this same kind of misunderstanding. We are misunderstanding the base of designation. We're misapprehending it. We all make the mistake of fictionalizing the world we live in. All our suffering arises from this misapprehension. And if we can see this, we'll stop attributing qualities of good and bad, and we'll stop limiting our compassion only to those we feel deserve it. This goes back to this idea of having as much compassion for the perpetrator as for the victim, because they both are experiencing suffering and will continue to experience suffering. The victim, perhaps in another life, is going to come back and want to get even. We see this cycle go on over and over and over again. So we need to have compassion for both. Take a much, much, much bigger view. We should investigate this very deeply. We need to ascertain in our own minds whether the recognition of the absence of inherent existence in all phenomena is free from fault. Is this millennia-old Buddhist philosophical view a real truth or some kind of religious dogma? We're the ones who have to make that decision. We're the ones who have to investigate that. Geshe Tashi says, the deeper we understand the philosophies of the various schools of tenets, the stronger our motivation will be to truly use this wisdom to turn our life around. So that's where we'll end it for today. That covers our 5 sessions on the two truths. There's so much more, of course, but any questions and discussions about any of this, any confusion that could perhaps be cleared up in 3 minutes. No? Okay. So next week, we'll go back to where we left off in the Precious Garland, because the reason we went here is because where we were at in the Precious Garland was getting a little too much, and it was getting too confusing. And there were topics that had not been covered in the Precious Garland that were just being introduced. So it was important to cover these in a fairly substantial way, not as deep as we could go, for sure. But the other thing that I want to do next week is begin with these practices, these meditation practices on understanding the model of the mind, the Buddhist model of the mind, the way consciousness works and functions, things that we never even think about. And what this does is it just a little bit, Kavita and I have been working on these exercises, it's like opens a door. It opens a door to understanding how we're thinking, how we're reacting, why we're doing this. It gets into very fine detail, the functioning of consciousness, the various levels of functioning. So it's not a quick thing to listen to, and it's not a quick thing to learn. It requires, the wonderful thing that Khenpo Rinpoche does in his book on this is that he presents the information, and the information is dense, and but he presents it in a clear way. He presents it in a way that you can actually understand it, rather than in a way that just seems like code, which I admire greatly. And but it is dense, and it's not going to be, we will not absorb it in one listening. It's going to take repetition, just like anything. Anything we get good at, we have to practice it over and over again before we become proficient. And before we can fully understand the concepts that are being presented, we need to go over them again and again and remind ourselves of what's being said, because I guarantee you some of this is very, very new, and we don't have a context for it. We don't have a context for it in our conventional world that we're used to. So we're going to take the time. There will be some repetition, but there also will be meditative type exercises that reinforce this model of the mind. And I'll take maybe a half an hour or more. We'll see, maybe at the beginning it might be more, but take that much time on that. And then the rest of the time will be on, maybe I'll divide it in half. And then the rest of the time will be on the Precious Garland. But I do believe that studying this model of the mind and doing these exercises is going to benefit us greatly in understanding Nagarjuna, because of course Nagarjuna is the most profound view in Buddhism, and this is what we were asked to study. And so I'm trying to do the best, figure out the best way for us to accomplish this in a way that's beneficial, that we actually get something out of it. So that's where we're headed. Okay, it is 12:30. Perfect. We can say some closing prayers, and everybody maintain a calm and even strain come November 4th. No matter what happens, remember it's samsara, like Geshe Dragpa said, and don't expect it to be nirvana, and don't expect it to be bliss. You know, I can guarantee no matter what happens, somebody's not going to be happy. So just leave that there and try and, try and remember that everything is a dependent arising. And things change, nothing's permanent. Okay, dedication prayers. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born in us, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May this profound view of emptiness, not yet born in us, arise and grow. And may whatever bit of emptiness that is born in us, our understanding that's born in us, may that have no decline, but increase forevermore. And the final dedication. In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma as the Buddha taught it, fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths. May I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara, the primordial Buddha that we all have the potential to become, the Buddha nature that's in us. May that increase and grow and never decline. Okay. All right. Everybody have a good week. Do your best on November 4th, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
So long.